Welcome back to the Motherly Shift. In this special episode, I want to share a powerful conversation I recently had with two phenomenal women. Dr. Heather Burton, a scholar and advocate for racial and gender equity, and Sherry White, a licensed therapist with over 20 years of experience. Unfortunately, the actual recording of our discussion was lost, and I do apologize. But I don't want that to stop me from bringing their wisdom and insights to you. Today, I'll walk you through the key themes, highlights, and reflections from our conversation about the African American mother-daughter dynamic. Their perspectives were not only professional, but also deeply personal, and what they shared deserves to be heard. But first, let me start by providing an introduction of who they are. I'd first like to acknowledge input from Dr. Heather Burton, a scholar, leader, and advocate for racial and gender equity. As faculty at Case Western Reserve University, Dr. Burton teaches in Africana Studies, theater, and social work, and her published works and leadership initiatives reflect a deep commitment to empowering Black women and addressing systemic inequities. Her voice brings both scholarly depth and lived understanding to this discussion. Alongside her, I acknowledge Sherry White, an independently licensed therapist with more than 20 years of experience in mental health and human services. Sherry has worked extensively with individuals, couples, and families, helping them navigate challenges like grief, trauma, conflict, and healing. Her strength-based approach and deep commitment to fostering healthy relationships make her perspective especially powerful for the themes we'll explore today. Together, Dr. Burton and Sherry White help to unpack the stories we've heard from the three-part series of the conversation, draw out the deeper truths, and highlight what they mean for mothers, daughters, and communities. I was honored to have them participate on this podcast, and I promise you will hear directly from them next week. So please continue to tune in. In preparing for this episode, I realized that there were 6 different themes that we discussed, and I'm happy to share those with you. We began by discussing why this conversation even matters. Both Heather and Sherry immediately agreed. This is a conversation that is much needed and too often avoided. Heather pointed out that the mother-daughter relationship is not monolithic. It can't be boiled down to one stereotype or single narrative. Each story is layered and multifaceted. Sherry added that across generations, these relationships carry so much complexity, and healing can only happen when we bring these stories to the forefront. That affirmation alone was powerful. It reminded me why I started the Motherly Shift podcast in the first place, to open up these conversations that so many of us carry quietly. The second theme discussed was the idea of the shifts. I then shared my own idea of what I call the motherly shift. To me, this is the idea that our relationship with our mothers has natural transition points, shifts, throughout our lives. I described 3. 1, early years, when the relationship is directive, focused on security, health, and guidance. 2, adolescence, when it becomes more collaborative, with more conversation, responsibility, and preparation for life beyond mom. And then 3, adulthood, when ideally it becomes an advisory relationship, more adult to adult, less directive, and more supportive. Both Heather and Sherry affirmed the value of this idea, but they also reminded me of the reality. Not every family reaches all of these shifts. Some relationships get stuck in one stage. Sherry noted that some daughters never experience the collaborative stage or never get to that adult advisory stage. For some, the relationship remains stagnant. And Heather connected this to life cycles. where mother and daughter are in their personal journeys of maturity shapes whether those shifts happen or not. Theme 3, complexity, mental health, and responsibility. One of the deepest parts of our discussion was about who holds responsibility for making these shifts happen. Heather's take was that before a mother can even begin nurturing a healthy relationship, she must be healthy as an individual. If a mother carries unhealed wounds, those often show up in how she relates to her daughter. Sherry built on that idea by pointing out how mental health plays a major role. If a mother struggles with mental illness, or if a daughter develops a mental health condition during young adulthood, that can prevent the natural progression of shifts. Sometimes it stalls the relationship entirely. What struck me most here was the acknowledgement that there isn't one answer. It isn't always the mother's responsibility or always the daughter's. The responsibility shifts, too, depending on where each woman is in their life cycle. Theme 4, love and adoration despite challenges. When Heather and Sherry reflected on the earlier episodes of the conversation with the movie night ladies, they both noticed something powerful. Despite the struggles and challenges the women shared, each one spoke of love and admiration for their mothers. Several even called their mothers their rock. Heather pointed out that even when a negative story was shared, the women often circled back quickly to a positive light, reinforcing the love, the attachment, and the bond. And Sherry reminded us that this attachment is almost universal. Even in cases of neglect or abuse, children often long to go back home to their mothers. She'd seen this countless times in her work with children and family services. That natural attachment, the bond formed at birth, runs deep. Theme 5, conversations left unsaid. Sherry then asked a question that has stayed with me. Have you actually had these conversations with your mothers? For many of us, the answer was no. Out of fear, out of protection, or out of uncertainty. We've often left things unsaid. Sherry shared her own story here. For years, she wanted to tell her mother how she felt, but avoided it because she didn't want to hurt her. Eventually, she reached a point where she felt she might have to distance herself for her own peace. With encouragement from an aunt, she finally had the conversation. To her surprise, it went well. Her mother admitted something Sherry had never expected. Her mother said, "I never thought you needed me." What a revelation. For years, Sherry thought her independence meant her mother didn't like her, but her mother saw it as strength. That misalignment of perception is something so many of us can relate to. It was a reminder that perception doesn't always equal truth, and that conversations, even hard ones, can unlock healing. Theme 6, cultural influences. Heather added another layer by noting the cultural weight in African American families. We are often taught to honor and revere our mothers no matter what. That cultural expectation shapes how we speak, or don't speak, about our experiences. And both Heather and Sherry reminded us of the common saying, mothers raise their daughters, but they nurture their sons. That imbalance shapes how daughters experience love and validation in unique and sometimes painful ways. As I reflect back, I think what Heather and Sherry gave us in this conversation is both challenge and hope. The challenge is to recognize the complexity, to acknowledge that not all shifts happen naturally, and that silence can leave wounds unhealed. The hope is that through conversation, through courage, honesty, and even vulnerability, we can move relationships forward. For me, this podcast is about more than telling stories. It's about learning how to have the best possible relationship with our mothers for however long we have them with us. So I leave you with this. What conversation do you still need to have with your mother or with your daughter? And what shift might be waiting for you on the other side of that dialogue? Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Motherly Shift. I hope walking you through my conversation with Dr. Heather Burton and Sherry White gave you some new insights into the beautiful complexity of the African American mother-daughter dynamic. But I don't want this conversation to stop here. I want to hear from you. What resonated with you? What questions do you have? What have you experienced in your own relationship as a mother or a daughter? You can share your thoughts, questions, and insights with me directly. Connect on social media. Follow and message me at Motherly Shift Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Or email me anytime at motherlyshiftpodcast@gmail.com. Your voice is an important part of this movement. And make sure you don't miss our next episode, where you will hear directly from Dr. Heather Burton and Sherry White as we dig even deeper into how our history plays into the African American mother-daughter dynamic. Trust me, you do not want to miss this conversation. So stay connected, keep listening, and let's keep shifting together. I'm Kim Michelle. Have a wonderful week.